Stop. Just stop for a moment. Take one slow breath and notice where you are right now. Because if you found this message at this exact point in your life, maybe you are not here by accident. Something has been changing inside you. You may not have the words for it yet. Maybe people around you have noticed that you are quieter. Maybe certain conversations no longer interest you. Maybe relationships that once felt natural suddenly feel distant. Maybe you have been standing at the edge of a decision, feeling that something bigger is waiting, but you cannot see what it is. And that feeling matters. You are not simply becoming tired of your old life. You are becoming aware of a life that no longer fits the person you are becoming. You won. Not because you defeated someone else. You won because you finally heard the signal beneath the noise. And now something is asking you to take your next leap in consciousness. But what does that actually mean? Imagine standing inside an ancient library buried beneath a silent desert. There are thousands of books around you, but none of them have titles. Instead, each book carries a faint, glowing frequency. You reach toward one, and the moment your fingers touch it, the entire room becomes silent. Then you hear a voice. Not outside you. Inside you. It says, "You are ready." You freeze. Because somehow, you recognize the voice. It sounds like you. This is where your next leap begins. Not with a dramatic event. Not with everything suddenly becoming perfect. It begins with a quiet shift in what you can no longer tolerate, what you can no longer pretend to believe, and what you can no longer ignore. Think about a radio. The signal has always been there. But if the radio is tuned to the wrong frequency, all you hear is static. Your life can feel the same way. You can spend years asking why the right people are not appearing, why certain doors keep closing, why your plans keep changing, why you feel pulled towards something you cannot explain. But here's the truth. A closed door is not always rejection. Sometimes it is redirection. Sometimes the field is removing what cannot travel with you into the next version of your life. And that is why certain losses have felt so strange. You thought you were losing people. You thought you were losing opportunities. You thought you were falling behind. But what if you were actually being released? What if the silence you feared was preparation? What if the emptiness you felt was not emptiness at all, but space being created for something you have never experienced before? You are ready. And your resistance is not proof that you should turn back. It may be proof that you have reached the threshold. There is always a moment before a leap when the old ground feels safer than the unknown. Your mind says, stay here. Your deeper awareness says, go. And for a while, those two voices fight. You may have felt that fight recently. One part of you wants certainty. Another part wants freedom. One part wants to know exactly what happens next. Another part knows that the next chapter cannot be controlled from the old identity. This is the strange part about transformation. You do not always receive the map before you move. Sometimes the path appears because you moved. And this changes everything. Because your next leap may not require you to become someone completely different. It may require you to stop being someone you were never meant to remain. There is a reason your old patterns have started becoming obvious. There is a reason certain words now feel empty. There is a reason you can walk into the same room, see the same people, hear the same conversations, and somehow feel that you are no longer the same person who entered that room before. The frequency changed. And maybe you did too. The moment you stop forcing the old reality, the new one finally has room to find you. Hold on to that line. Because what comes next goes deeper. In a moment, you're going to see why this feeling of being between two lives is not necessarily confusion, and why the strange pull you have been feeling may be pointing toward a threshold you have been approaching for much longer than you realize. So take another breath. Slowly. You are here. You are listening. And somewhere beyond the noise, the signal has already begun. Maybe you have been wondering why everything feels different lately. Why some people suddenly feel distant. Why old goals no longer excite you. Why you can be surrounded by familiar things and still feel like something is missing. You may have even asked yourself, what is wrong with me? Nothing is wrong with you. You are standing between two versions of yourself. And that space can feel strange. It can feel like walking through a desert with no map, no signs, and no clear destination. Behind you is everything you already know. Ahead of you is something you can feel, but cannot yet see. And this is where most people turn back. They return to the old relationship, the old habit, the old fear, the old identity. Not because it makes them happy, but because it is familiar. You, however, have already started noticing the difference. You cannot unknow what you now know. You cannot pretend that certain things still feel right when they don't. That is why your next leap begins with awareness. Before the outer world changes, your inner world changes first. Imagine a massive field of invisible signals surrounding you. Every thought, choice, belief, and emotional pattern is like a frequency being sent into that field. For years, you may have been sending the same signal without realizing it. I am not ready. I need permission. What if I fail? What if they leave? What if I choose wrong? But then something happened. You became tired of hearing your own fear. And one day, even if only for a few seconds, you heard another signal. What if I can? That tiny question can become a doorway. Because once you begin asking a different question, you begin seeing different possibilities. And suddenly, the same life looks different. The same problem reveals another solution. The same closed door reveals another path. The same ending begins to look like an entrance. But here's where the mystery deepens. Your next leap may not arrive in the form you expect. You may be waiting for a huge opportunity, a sudden financial breakthrough, a perfect relationship, a dramatic sign. But what if the first sign is much smaller? A decision you finally make, a boundary you finally set, a message you finally stop sending, a place you finally leave, a dream you finally take seriously. Sometimes consciousness expands through one simple choice that your old self would have been too afraid to make. That is why you should pay attention to the moments when you suddenly feel calm about something that used to terrify you. That calm matters. It is like standing at the edge of a dark room and realizing the darkness is not attacking you. It is simply waiting for you to turn on the light. And you are beginning to understand that you carry the switch. You were looking outside for confirmation, but the confirmation was already happening inside you. Think about Izara. She had spent years believing that her life was supposed to follow one straight road. Study, work, marriage, security, approval. Everything had been planned. Then, within 1 year, almost every part of that plan began falling apart. The job she depended on disappeared. A relationship she thought would last ended without warning. Friends she had known for years slowly stopped calling. One night, Izara sat alone beside her window while rain moved across the glass. She looked at her reflection and whispered, "What am I supposed to do now?" For the first time, there was no answer. Only silence. She almost cried. Then she noticed something strange. On the table beside her was an old notebook she had not opened in years. She reached for it. Inside were drawings she had made when she was younger. A golden city, a doorway surrounded by light. And beneath it, one sentence written in her own handwriting. "I will know when it is time." Izara stared at those words. She did not remember writing them. Then, beneath that sentence, she noticed something she had never seen before. A small symbol. A circle surrounded by 3 lines. The same symbol appeared on the wall outside her window, glowing faintly through the rain. Izara stood up. Her heart began beating faster. She moved toward the glass. The symbol disappeared. But the feeling remained. And she suddenly understood something. The message had not appeared because her life was ending. It had appeared because she was finally ready to see it. And maybe that is happening to you too. Maybe the signs are not becoming louder. Maybe you are becoming quiet enough to notice them. The signal was never missing. You were becoming ready to receive it. So don't rush past this moment. Because what Izara discovered next would change the way she understood every closed door, every painful ending, and every strange feeling that had brought her to that exact point. And your next realization may begin the same way, with something you almost ignored. Izara almost ignored it. She could have closed the notebook, turned off the light, and gone to sleep. Instead, she stood there staring at the place where the glowing symbol had appeared. Something inside her said, "Look again." So she opened the window. Cold air moved across her face. The street below was empty. No person. No car. No sound except the rain. Then she noticed a faint golden light at the end of the street. It was moving, slowly. Not like a car. Not like a person carrying a lamp. It looked more like a small pulse of light moving through the darkness. Izara stepped outside. One step, then another. She did not know where she was going. She only knew that something was pulling her forward. And this is where your own journey becomes important. Because you may have experienced moments like this without realizing what they were. A sudden idea. A strong feeling to change direction. A strange sense that you should call someone. A dream you cannot forget. A quiet thought that keeps returning no matter how many times you push it away. You call it coincidence. You call it intuition. You call it imagination. But what if it is simply the beginning of a new pattern? Now listen carefully. Not every feeling is a message. Not every coincidence has a hidden meaning. But when a thought keeps returning, when a choice keeps appearing, when something inside you becomes impossible to ignore, it is worth paying attention. Because your consciousness changes when you stop running from your own awareness. Izara followed the light for several minutes. It led her beyond the houses and toward the edge of the desert. She stopped. The light was gone. There was nothing ahead except sand beneath a dark sky. She almost laughed at herself. What am I doing? Then she heard a sound behind her. A voice. Waiting for permission? Izara turned. An old woman stood several feet away. She was holding a small lantern. Izara stared at her. Who are you? The woman smiled. Someone who has already crossed the threshold you're standing in front of. Izara looked toward the desert. There is nothing there. The woman shook her head. That's what people say when they are looking with old eyes. Izara felt a chill move through her. What threshold? The woman raised the lantern. Your next one. For a moment, neither spoke. Then the woman walked past her and placed the lantern on the sand. The light spread across the ground. And suddenly, lines appeared beneath the sand. A huge circle. Then another. Then another. It looked like a map made of light. Izara stepped closer. At the center was the same symbol from her notebook. The circle. The 3 lines. Her breath caught. You've seen this before, the woman said. Izara nodded slowly. In my notebook. The woman looked at her. No. She pointed toward the symbol. You saw it there because you had already seen it somewhere else. Izara's heart began racing. Where? The woman did not answer. Instead, she asked, what are you most afraid of losing? Izara looked down. My old life. The woman smiled gently. That's not the real answer. Izara swallowed. After a long silence, she whispered, my identity. The woman nodded. Now we're getting closer. That sentence stayed with Izara, because suddenly she understood why change had felt so painful. It was not only about losing people or opportunities. It was about losing the version of herself that had been built around them. The version who needed approval. The version who stayed where she was unhappy because leaving felt dangerous. The version who waited for someone else to tell her that she was ready. And perhaps you know that version too. You may have spent years protecting an identity that no longer protects you. You learned how to survive. But now life is asking you to learn how to expand. That's a different journey. Survival asks, how do I stay safe? Expansion asks, what am I capable of becoming? And the moment you ask that second question, the field of possibilities becomes larger. Not because magic suddenly takes control of your life, but because your choices begin changing. You notice opportunities you once ignored. You speak differently. You set different boundaries. You stop chasing what keeps running away. You begin walking toward what feels aligned with who you are becoming. This is the real leap. Not escaping reality. Changing the way you meet it. Izara looked at the glowing map again. The woman picked up the lantern. Tomorrow, she said, you will have a choice. What choice? The woman turned away. That's the part you must discover yourself. Then she walked into the darkness. Izara watched until the lantern disappeared. She looked back at the glowing symbol. And then something happened. The symbol changed. 3 lines became 4. And beneath them, words appeared in the sand. You cannot enter while holding on. Izara stepped backward. Because she suddenly knew exactly what she had to release. But she had no idea what would happen if she did. And that is where the next threshold begins. Your next reality often begins where your old identity finally lets go. So if something in your life has been falling away lately, don't immediately assume you are being punished. Maybe you're being prepared. Maybe the door closing is making space for another door. And maybe, just maybe, you are closer to your leap than you think. Izara stayed there until the sky began to change. The darkness slowly turned gray. The glowing symbol faded beneath the sand. But those words remained in her mind. You cannot enter while holding on. She knew exactly what they meant. There was one thing she had refused to release. A relationship that had ended months ago. She had told everyone she was fine. She had deleted the messages, removed the photographs, and stopped talking about it. But deep inside, she was still waiting. Waiting for one message. One apology. One explanation. One sign that maybe the story was not over. She had been trying to move forward while secretly looking backward. And that was the weight she had been carrying. Maybe you have your own version of it. Maybe it is a person. Maybe it is an old dream. Maybe it is regret. Maybe it is the need to prove yourself to someone who never believed in you. Sometimes the hardest thing to release is not the thing itself. It is the future you imagined around it. Izara returned home as the sun rose. She opened her notebook again. The page looked normal now. No glowing symbol. No strange words. Just an empty page. She picked up her pen. For several minutes, she did nothing. Then she wrote one sentence. I release what I cannot take with me. Her hand stopped. She almost crossed it out. Then she wrote it again. I release what I cannot take with me. Something inside her became quiet. Not happy. Not excited. Just quiet. And sometimes that quiet is the first sign that something has shifted. You don't always feel a dramatic burst of energy when you change. Sometimes you simply stop fighting. You stop asking the same question. You stop waiting for the same person. You stop forcing the same door. And suddenly, you have energy again. That morning, Izara received a message. Her former partner had finally written to her. For months, she had imagined this moment. She thought she would feel relief. She thought her heart would race. Instead, she looked at the screen and felt nothing. Not anger. Not excitement. Just peace. She deleted the message. Then she smiled. For the first time, she understood. The test was not whether the person would return. The test was whether she still needed them to. And she didn't. That was her leap. No glowing portal. No voice from the sky. No miracle. Just one choice made from a new version of herself. And that choice changed what happened next. Because that afternoon, an opportunity arrived that she would once have been too afraid to accept. A small research group was looking for someone to help with a project involving consciousness, human perception, meditation, and patterns of attention. The work was uncertain. The pay was modest. The location was far away. Her old self would have said no. But she remembered the desert. She remembered the words in the sand. You cannot enter while holding on. So she accepted. 3 days later, Izara left. As the train moved across the desert, she watched the familiar city disappear behind her. She did not know what waited ahead. But for the first time, she did not need to know. And this is where your own next leap may begin. You may be waiting to feel completely ready. You may be waiting for certainty. You may be waiting for someone to tell you that the timing is perfect. But certainty rarely comes first. Movement comes first. Then clarity. Then confidence. Then the new path becomes visible. Think of a bridge covered in fog. You can only see the first few steps. If you refuse to move until you can see the other side, you may never cross. But if you take the first step, then the next step appears. And then another. This is why your next chapter may already be forming around choices you are making right now. The people you are distancing yourself from. The habits you are changing. The ideas you are finally taking seriously. The boundaries you are learning to protect. None of these things are random. They are pieces of a larger shift. You are not becoming disconnected from life. You are becoming more connected to what actually matters. And here's what no one tells you. When your inner world changes, your outer world may feel uncomfortable for a while. The old life does not disappear instantly. There can be an awkward space where the old identity is gone. But the new identity has not fully arrived. That space can feel lonely. It can feel confusing. It can make you wonder if you made a mistake. But don't mistake unfamiliarity for failure. You have never lived this version of yourself before. Of course it feels unfamiliar. Izara eventually arrived at a small research center surrounded by mountains. Inside was an enormous circular room filled with strange instruments, books, drawings, and walls covered in frequency patterns. At the center stood a massive glass structure. It looked like a doorway, but there was no door. One of the researchers walked toward Izara. He looked at her notebook. Then his expression changed. Where did you get this symbol? Izara stared at him. You know it. He didn't answer immediately. He slowly closed the door behind them. Then he whispered, "We've been looking for someone who carries that symbol for 27 years. Izara felt the ground beneath her feet become strangely still, because suddenly, the journey was no longer only about her. Something had been waiting, and now, it had finally found her. The leap begins when you stop asking whether you are ready and start becoming the person who can cross." Izara looked at the glass doorway. A faint light appeared inside it, and this time, the light was moving toward her. The light moved closer. Izara did not step back. She stood completely still as the glow inside the glass doorway became brighter. The researcher beside her looked nervous. "You need to understand something," he said. "This machine has never responded like this before." Izara looked at him. "What is it?" He hesitated. "We call it the resonance gate." She stared at the glass structure. "Where does it lead?" The researcher gave a slow breath. "That is what we've been trying to understand." The room became silent. Then the lights around the walls began flickering, one after another. Then all at once, a deep vibration filled the room. Izara felt it in her chest. She closed her eyes. And suddenly, she was no longer standing inside the research center. She was somewhere else. A golden city stretched across the horizon. Tall structures made of light rose from the ground. Above them was a sky filled with moving patterns, like waves of energy flowing through space. Izara walked forward. No one was there. Yet she did not feel alone. She heard a voice. "You have crossed the first threshold." She turned. There was no one behind her. "What is this place?" The voice answered. "The place you kept searching for outside yourself." Izara looked around. The golden city began changing. The buildings disappeared. The desert appeared. Then her childhood home. Then her old workplace. Then the room where her relationship had ended. Every place she had ever attached part of her identity to appeared around her. Then they all disappeared. Izara understood. The field was not showing her the future. It was showing her what she had been carrying. Every fear, every expectation, every version of herself, every story she had believed about who she was supposed to be. And then something unexpected happened. She saw herself standing alone in the middle of the golden city. But this version of Izara looked different. Calm, strong, free. She turned toward that version of herself. "Who are you?" The other Izara smiled. "The part of you that you kept postponing." Those words hit her harder than anything else, because she realized how much of her life had been spent waiting. Waiting until she was confident. Waiting until people approved. Waiting until she had enough money. Waiting until she knew exactly what would happen. Waiting until fear disappeared. But fear had never needed to disappear. She had simply needed to stop letting it make every decision. The golden city began glowing brighter. The voice returned. "Your next leap is not about becoming more powerful." Izara listened. "It is about becoming less divided." The city vanished. She was back inside the research center. The vibration stopped. The glass doorway was dark again. The researcher looked at her. "What did you see?" Izara looked at her hands. "I saw myself." He frowned. "Yourself?" She nodded. "But not the version I have been." The researcher slowly stepped closer. "Then you saw what we call the future resonance." Izara looked up. "Future resonance?" "It is the pattern of the person you become when your choices stop being controlled by your old fears." She stared at him. "So you're saying the future already exists?" "No." He shook his head. "I'm saying your possible future leaves signals in the choices you make today." That distinction mattered. Because your next leap does not mean waiting for some invisible force to rescue you. It means becoming more aware of the choices that are shaping your direction. Every day, you tune yourself. Through what you repeatedly think, what you repeatedly say, what you repeatedly accept, what you repeatedly avoid. You are always sending a signal. And eventually, your life begins reflecting the pattern you keep reinforcing. This is why your smallest decisions matter. The conversation you finally have. The habit you finally break. The dream you finally protect. The boundary you finally create. The fear you finally face. One choice can become a new frequency. One new frequency can become a new pattern. And one new pattern can change the direction of an entire life. Izara walked back toward the resonance gate. The researcher suddenly stopped her. Wait. She turned. He pointed at the center of the glass. A tiny symbol had appeared. The same circle. The same 3 lines. But this time there was something beneath it. A 4th line. Izara's face changed. The symbol from the desert. The researcher nodded. It has appeared only once before. When he looked directly into her eyes. 27 years ago. Izara felt a cold wave move through her. Who was here? The researcher said nothing. She stepped closer. Who? He finally answered. Your mother. Izara froze. For years, she had believed her mother had simply disappeared from her life after leaving when Izara was very young. There had been no explanation. No letter. No goodbye. Only an empty room and unanswered questions. But now, there was a symbol, a machine, a hidden research center, and a message that seemed to have been waiting for her before she even knew she was looking for it. The researcher opened a small metal box. Inside was an old photograph. He handed it to her. Izara looked down. Her mother stood beside the resonance gate, and in her hand was the same notebook, the one Izara had found in her own room. Izara's fingers began trembling. She turned the photograph over. There was one sentence written on the back. When she is ready, tell her the field remembers. Izara looked up. She knew I would come here? The researcher slowly nodded. She believed you would. And suddenly, every strange feeling, every closed door, every impossible coincidence seemed connected to one question. What had her mother discovered all those years ago? Because the answer was about to reveal why Izara's next leap had begun long before she ever recognized the signal. Sometimes the future does not call you forward. It awakens the part of you that has been waiting all along. The researcher placed his hand on the resonance gate. The glass began to glow again. But this time, a human voice came from inside it. Izara heard her mother's voice, and it said her name. Izara. She stopped breathing for a moment. That voice. She knew it, even though she had not heard it since childhood. Her mother's voice came through the resonance gate again. Izara, if you can hear this, then you have already crossed the first threshold. Tears filled Izara's eyes. She stepped closer to the glass. Mom. The researcher lowered his head and moved away. He knew this moment belonged to her. The voice continued. I know you will have questions. I know you will want to understand why I left. But before you search for answers, you must understand something more important. The light inside the gate became softer. You were never abandoned. Izara covered her mouth. For years, she had carried one painful belief. That she had not been enough. That something about her had made her mother leave. That belief had quietly shaped so many of her choices. Every time someone walked away, she expected it. Every time someone became distant, she blamed herself. Every time something good appeared, part of her waited for it to disappear. But now, one sentence was breaking a belief she had carried for most of her life. You were never abandoned. Her mother's voice continued. I left because I discovered something I could not ignore. I found a pattern inside human consciousness. A pattern that appears when a person is ready to change the direction of their life. Izara looked at the researcher. He nodded. Her mother continued. The field does not choose your future for you. It responds to the choices you repeatedly make. The words felt strangely familiar. Izara remembered the Golden City. The future version of herself. The threshold. The choices. The release. Everything was connecting. Her mother spoke again. People wait for signs because they believe the sign will tell them what to do. But the real sign is what changes inside you after you see it. Izara closed her eyes. She finally understood. The symbol was never the destination. The message was never about some magical future. It was about awareness. About choice. About becoming conscious of the person she was creating every day. The voice began fading. Your leap will not happen when the world changes for you. A pause. It happens when you change the way you meet the world. Izara opened her eyes. Wait. The light flickered. Where are you? Silence. Then one final sentence came through. You already know where to look. The gate went dark. Izara stood there, frozen. The researcher walked toward her. She recorded that message 27 years ago. But where is she now? We don't know. Izara stared at the empty glass. Then she remembered the notebook. She pulled it from her bag and opened it. The pages began turning by themselves. One page, then another, then another. They stopped at the final page. There was a drawing. A desert, a mountain, a golden city, and beneath it was a sentence she had never seen before. Go where the shadow of the mountain touches the sand at sunset. Izara looked at the researcher. He had gone pale. You know that place? He nodded slowly. Everyone here knows that place. Where is it? He looked toward the window. 3 days from here. Izara felt her heart race. 3 days. The journey was not over. It had only become clearer. And maybe that is exactly what happens after your own inner shift. You do not suddenly receive every answer. You receive the next step, then another, then another. The field does not need to show you the entire road. It only needs to reveal enough for you to move. This is where many people become frustrated. They say, I asked for a sign. But what they really wanted was a guarantee. They wanted to know that they could not fail. They wanted the future promised to them before they took the first step. But growth does not work that way. A leap requires trust before certainty. You move. Then you understand. You choose. Then the path becomes visible. You release. Then you discover what your hands were meant to hold. And if you have been feeling uncertain lately, perhaps you are not lost. Perhaps you are simply standing where your old map ends. That is not failure. That is the threshold. Izara packed that evening. She did not know what she would find in the mountains. She did not know whether her mother was still alive. She did not know whether the message would lead to answers or more questions. But she knew one thing. She was no longer willing to live from fear. Before leaving, she stood beside the window and looked at the night sky. She took a slow breath. Then she whispered, I am ready. Nothing happened. No light. No voice. No miracle. She smiled. Because she finally understood that she did not need one. The decision itself was the signal. You don't need the whole path revealed. You only need the courage to take the step that becomes visible. And as Izara walked out of the building the next morning, something appeared in the sky above the mountains. A faint golden ring. It lasted only a few seconds. But she saw it. And deep inside, she knew the final threshold was waiting.